Hello, everyone, and welcome to another Into the Terminal. Today, we're going to be talking about surviving your Linux tech interview. So, Nate, you've done some interviews in your day.
Yeah, I mean, I've been on both the receiving and the interviewing end of these over the years. I've never worked in management like you have, but you don't get to be senior sysadmin without having to evaluate a couple of newbies, right? So,
Exactly, and so this we will have a follow-on episode probably next month on hiring manager interview. Uh, we'll talk some about like non-technical stuff, but I thought that we would talk about technical interview questions and get to some of the why and that kind of stuff today. But I think that probably begs a couple of questions. So, Nate, what is a technical interview?
right. So, most interview processes they have the usual HRE stuff, are you qualified, what's your work experience, all that kind of stuff. But it's rare that you'll get interviewed for an actual tech position where we won't try to evaluate stuff like what have you done? What do you know? Can you troubleshoot your way out of a wet paper bag, right? Those sort of things. So that's usually known as the technical interview.
Yeah, and I'll go a step further on that, right? Like, this is not the if you could be any color, what color would you be questions. This is
Right.
the assessment by usually one or more people who already work at the company to determine whether you have the skill set that they're looking for the role they're trying to fill, right? So if you're interviewing as a sysadmin, they're going to ask you sysadmin role type questions, and we'll have a couple of them in the deeper dive segment. Um, if it is a software engineer, they're going to ask you software engineer type questions, right? To gauge whether you have the right skills to work with them in whatever they're doing. So, with software engineering, that may be about languages and writing pseudocode, or even things like uh, uh, practices around management of code, right? Code reviews, get stuff um, to see that you have the background to be kind of ready to go with what they're doing. And the same is
Right.
true for sysadmin or Linux jobs or what have you. Um, so I think I actually inadvertently asked the second question I was going to ask Nate, which is why do employers conduct technical interviews?
Yeah, and you're right. You've already sort of touched on it, but it's basically to evaluate whether you actually know the things that you claim to know, right? So in some cases, you could you know in a lot of technical positions, you're responsible for some very important infrastructure within a company, right? So, especially for something like an administration or a networking position or, something that has to deal with infrastructure. So, we can't just take it on faith that the person that you're interviewing, the things that they wrote on their resume or whatever are actually true, right? You need to try to evaluate whether they do in fact know how to do the things that you're hiring them to do. Otherwise, you could end up with things on fire. Some places have large enough teams that it's pretty easy to spot the person who really doesn't know what they're doing because you have a bunch of other talent that's there to sort of pick up the slack. But I've worked in places where I was the only admin, right? And if the guy who hired me made a mistake and realized too late, then it puts his business in jeopardy. And, you know, obviously I'm not going to work there very long and he's going to have to go back to the hiring process, right? There's a big investment in hiring someone and it's a pain in the butt to fire someone depending on where you are in the world.
Yeah, and realize that like Linux expertise, that is a really broad descriptor, right?
Right.
Like we know that if somebody came from, I don't know, an Arch Linux background, their experiences and the tool sets that they use and the procedures they're used to performing may be very different from somebody in an Ubuntu or RHEL background, right? So even if you're widely skilled on Linux, there's different tools and different procedures used on different distributions, which is probably at least worth figuring out before you bring this person into your organization.
Yeah,
Uh,
because at the very least, that could turn into a learning curve thing where they're not going to be proficient on day one, and at the worst, it could be that they're doing things completely in the wrong way on your platform that you've chosen versus the one they're familiar with.
yeah. Um, so we're going to get into some interview questions in just a minute, but I want to set the stage a little bit on that. So when we're doing technical interviews, in my experience, a good technical interview is one where the interviewer asks questions and follow-up questions to kind of gauge the limits of the interviewee's knowledge and expertise, right? So it usually starts off with something very broad, and then based off of the interviewee's answer, there's going to be additional questions to get more specific, to get at like how deep does this person go on this subject, right? But you always start really broad. So if they can't even answer the really broad question or the really like basic question, then it's probably not worthwhile to probe them deeper on that to figure out how deep they can go, because they've already told you by not being able to do well on the broad question. The other thing is that in a good technical interview, you're wanting to provide the person some uh, context for the question, right? So when I say a broad question, um, you know, if you say, hey, and this is one of ours, you're having a problem networking, what do you do? If they just like rattle off a whole bunch of commands and that's it, there's naming commands that have to do with networking. That's probably not the type of interview answer you're looking for. And so, you ask some follow-ups to try and get some clarity. But once you've figured out that you're not getting what you need from that person, move to the next thing, right? Like, don't just keep banging on them on the one thing that they've already shown their depth on.
Right.
All right. So yeah, we're going to get into questions in just a moment. But Nate, we have a new sponsor this week.
Yeah. First, a word from our not so skeevy as last time sponsor. Man, that was just bad. This week we've got Nate's Pretty Good Meal Prep Services. Are you sick of thinking for yourself? Don't want to take the time to prep your own food? Maybe you're just really busy or locked in a data center and can't take time away for unimportant things like caloric intake. Well, for a mere 1 million per month. Yeah, we're up in the game here. 1 million per month. Nate will ship you barely edible instant food in a fancy label and tell you it's good for you, because we get it. Your health is secondary.
I feel compelled to ask, secondary to what?
Getting the servers back up and running. Obviously, you're locked in a data center. Didn't you pay attention?
Okay. All right, fine.
Maybe I should have called it Nate's on-call meal prep delivery service. I don't know. We'll ship you pizza to the data center door.
That's right. Oh,
All
all
right.
right. So for this episode, Nate, you're the interviewer and I'm the interviewee. Is that what's going on here?
Well, no. So I figured you've got a lot more experience interviewing people for positions. I've been involved in a couple of them, so I figure you're sort of the expert here. So I'll like prompt you. How's that sound?
Okay.
All right. So you started with a pretty good overview there, but I guess we'll just kind of jump right into it. What kind of questions do you like to ask of prospective, candidates when you're interviewing people for a
So
tech, for a tech interview, of course.
yeah, so one, I want to assess their understanding of the commands and that they can recall them pretty easily and know how to apply them without needing to look them up on a search engine. So I usually start off with something that is pretty broad. I like to start with networking because that's something that I think a lot of people have experience with. And I'll ask them something like, if a user reported a network problem to you, what would you do to diagnose it, and what would you look for when running the commands to diagnose it? And usually
Ping,
that spawns a
ping,
follow-up question.
nmap.
Yeah, yeah. Usually that spawns a follow-up question of like, well, what's the error?
Right.
Because
Right.
that usually determines where you have to go first. But yeah,
And
so if
then,
they just start saying like ping nmap, and I haven't even told them the error message, like
yeah, so I mean,
that's interesting.
I don't know if this is how you would handle it, but that could be a good leading question to see what they do next, right? If they just start rattling off network terminologies or like postulating on what a problem could be, oh, maybe it's the gateway, maybe it's the yada, maybe rats shoot on the wires, maybe it's sunspots. Um, if they immediately lead up with, well, what's it doing? What's the behavior? What's the error message? Then that could lead you to believe that they are better at trying to assess a problem before jumping in to try to resolve it.
Right. And that's also something that like I've seen is that people who tell you the problem right away without asking any follow-up questions, that applies to all sorts of their behavior in the job, not just troubleshooting networking.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and so usually you want somebody that will at least try to find something like the error message or ask a couple of follow-up questions to better uh, determine the scope of the task that they've been asked. Right. So for this one, um, that's one thing. Like, what's the actual error message? And how about I say, well, the error message is no such host. They're SSHing, and what they get back is no such host.
Right. So then that would lead into, how do you troubleshoot that? Is a DNS resolution issue? Do you have the wrong host name? Right. Is your resolver set up properly on the machine you're trying to connect from? Right.
Is your interface unplugged? Like, there's
Yeah.
a lot of
Right.
things that can cause that error,
Right.
and so that leads into like the next phase of the question, right? Which is how do you actually troubleshoot it? And if we bring up the my terminal, we can take a look at some of that.
Yep.
All right, so if I SSH RHEL client,
There we go.
right? There you go. There's the error. And so you can see over here, there's actually a box called RHEL client. But when I try to SSH to it, I can't. So one might jump to the conclusion that it's a DNS thing, right? Name or service not known.
Right.
And it happened pretty quickly, which leads me to believe that we did do some kind of DNS resolution or something to get that error message, right? But we should always kind of start at the beginning. Right? So does this machine have configured networking, right? And one of the things that we get out of this is our network, right? So you might do something like this. That's not what I want to do. Right, so I can get responses from my own interface. And I happen to have this other box over here, which I told you was the target box. And maybe I can just do this. Right, so if I'm pinging it by its IP address, that works fine.
Right. Means
So
you can reach
I'm
it.
able to pass traffic between the two systems. But if I ping it by RHEL client, right, I'm getting the same error message about name or service not known. So because I'm able to get the IP-based traffic there, but it's a problem with actually converting from the name to the IP address, that kind of points me towards DNS in some way. So we could take a look at like the etcresolve.conf, right? And here's my DNS server. And we could use DNS troubleshooting tools like host, or if it's installed. Oh man,
You got nothing.
that's right. Man,
It's like bind utils or something, isn't it?
You're right.
Unless that's
I think you're right.
changed.
I think you're right. There we go.
There we go.
All right,
See
let's try
that?
this again.
On the fly.
All right. Right. So when we're doing a host name lookup, it's not like to DNS. It's coming back with no record found.
Right.
But this may not be the end of the story, right? Maybe there was never a record for this host in DNS. So we can ask follow-up questions like who runs the DNS server and what domain are they a member of. We can actually do DNS troubleshooting things. Or maybe it's just something as simple as we just need to go in here.
That's a cheap way out.
Right? And then now when we do our ping, if you spell it right, it works the way you expect.
See, right? That was the trick, though. It was really that the whole time it was just spelled wrong.
which also I've seen.
Yeah, right? You spend a half an hour troubleshooting something and realize that it was a typo to begin with.
Right. But so what we demonstrated with the answer to this interview question was the person understands how networking works, right? There's multiple components. There's the IP layer, there's DNS. We didn't get to it, but they may have talked about a little bit about routing, being able to look up a bunch of commands, right? ifconfig, doing DNS queries, knowing the configuration files that go along with it, and then kind of like doing the assessment up the stack to figure out where we started running into our failure and then troubleshooting where we're running into the failure. So, you're showing how you approach a problem in addition to showing your expertise with the tools to use and what data you're looking for when you're running the tools.
I was once in an interview where they asked me to, what was it? They asked me to write a DNS zone file, like in a text editor. So that was a fun one I once got. And there was another one where they asked me to, using Telnet, connect to an SMTP server and send an email.
Yeah. So I would classify those more as stump the chump interview questions.
Yeah.
So personally, I typically don't go that direction, right? Because I don't want to have the person do something that's arcane. Like writing an email through port 25 is a bit arcane. Like that's not something that we do at the job.
Right.
It does show the depth of knowledge on email that the commands to run on port 25 to generate and send that email, assuming the server is able to actually do it without a whole bunch of configuration-y things.
Yeah. Well, this was in the days when SMTP was simpler and part of the job was email management. So that's really the only reason it was related. But I did find it to be a very odd question.
Right. Like if the job was email management, I probably wouldn't ask you to write a direct email on port 25, but I certainly would ask you about where does the mail server queue up its email?
Right.
Where does it put its logs? If someone is unable to send an email, how would you troubleshoot that problem? Right? Because that's going to tell me where in that circle of managing and sending email you have expertise.
Right.
But just like we were talking about different Linux distros, like there's different mail servers, right? There's SendMail, there's Postfix, there's Zim, there's Exchange. So, just because Postfix, is that a match for what the employer needs for their job?
Right.
But yeah, the other one that you said was writing a DNS zone file from scratch.
Yeah.
It's like
was just mean, I think.
Yeah. How frequently would I need to do that from scratch? Like, are you telling me the internet is dead and I can't use the internet?
Right. We have no templates, no examples. You've been asked to in this closed off room, you must create a DNS server. with no
Yeah.
documentation.
Which the like more kind way of doing that would be to ask about different record types.
Yeah.
Like tell me
Or
some
like,
different
show me you
record
can make
types
a
that this.
change to this zone file, right? Like, how would you make the change? That might be different, right? Back in the days when you had to manage DNS via text files, which is not nearly as common anymore as it used to be.
Right.
So
Um,
you have some other questions that you've noted here, and we kind of went deep on the first one. Is there another one in your list here that you'd like to grab and talk about?
how about the one about if you forget a command?
Okay.
So Nate, if you don't know the command to use to do a thing, how do you find it out?
Tab autocomplete.
Okay.
I mean, that's one way, but
If you know what it
yes,
begins with,
yeah,
unless
yeah,
you're just
right,
a blank
exactly.
command line and hit tab, you
Yeah,
could do
so
that too.
that one is a little bit tricky, right? Because you're starting with like it assumes that you have some base knowledge about where you would start with said command, right? But if you ask me about a command that I've never seen or used before, then that's a tough one because even to use like man, you'd have to at least have an idea where to start, right?
Yeah. So there's a couple things you do. One, I think Google is like the great equalizer.
Yeah,
But
yeah,
let's assume for a moment that for whatever reason you can't use
yeah. I was running under the assumption you
AI.
didn't want me to go to Google,
Maybe.
but I could.
Uh,
That's probably where I would go if I was completely unaware. Like where do I start? I would go with Google and get
yeah.
like that starter information.
And then like just because Google says, is that really the command you want to use? Or maybe it's not
Right.
installed, or maybe it's not included with your distro that's being used. So there's a whole bunch of systemy things that you can do too. And you mentioned man,
Hmm.
right? So you could try to find the man page for the command, or if you didn't know what it was called, but you knew some parameters, like that it worked with processes or that it did system memory, how could you use those parameters to better identify what command it might be?
I'm drawing a blank on this one. There's another method that you had shown me in the past, which I had not used in the past. I can't remember what it is.
You've not used man-k?
That's it right there. Man dash K. I don't know. Actually, no, I haven't. But I was.
Wow.
You also have to remember, right? The availability of Google searches was very prominent when I got started in systems administration, right? So I would usually get my start on, okay, how do I do a thing via Google, and then I would refine it using command line tools that were available on the machine that I was working with.
Like looking at the man page for that specific command you found via Google or dash
Right,
dash help for that command.
right, right.
Sure. Um,
Nowadays, you'd probably just go to an AI and ask it, right?
I mean, if you're allowed to,
If
right?
you're allowed
But
to.
if you're working in a disconnected environment,
Right,
that's maybe
right,
not allowed.
right.
Um, but so what we're finding out when asking that question is, can this person research their own problems? Right. Um, and then when we ask things like, oh, well, you can't use Google, we're figuring out whether they can continue to research their own problems because they know a little bit more about what's available on the system through man or something else.
Right.
We're then starting to like figure out the depth that they can go on solving this problem.
There was a recommendation in chat for a tool called Apropos, which
So
again I've heard of.
apropos uh, is what man-k is.
Hmm.
When you use man-k, it's actually using apropos behind the scenes. And
Okay.
both of them work off of a database called the What Is database. There was actually a Reddit question in the Red Hat Reddit about this recently, but uh, so uh, then the tech interview is usually with the teammates that you may be working with.
Right.
And so what I've also noticed is like they'll ask you some actual like nerdy, give me the commands questions. They might have you do a task, like write me a shell script that does this. But then
Write a
they'll also
DNS
ask
file.
you, yeah, write a DNS file, exactly. But then they'll also ask you some things about the team,
Hmm.
right? So like, Nate, how do you document things? What tools do you use? And what kind of documentation do you make?
Right. That's a pretty good one because there's a lot of cases. I've walked into a lot of places where they weren't very on point with their documentation, or each administrator that preceded me had their own way of keeping documentation, and so now none of it's all in the same place, and none of it's easy to search. Right. So if you're going to be working with a team, or honestly, if there's going to be any sort of continuity at all to what you're doing, documentation is really important. Right. And I mean, I guess there's two sides to the coin, right? If you're working with a relatively novice, right? You're hiring a junior admin, for example. You can teach them the ways in which your team documents stuff. But if you've got someone who's really set in their ways and they're like, I document everything in this spiral bound notebook, right? That may be a
I only
difficult
use,
thing to integrate into your team, right?
yeah. And this is also a place where realize that when you're going through interviews, the people interviewing you are wanting to figure out whether you're a good fit for them. But you need to figure out whether they're a good fit for you.
Right.
So a question like this opens up a really nice door for you to ask some stuff about them. So you could tell them about what you do and how you prefer things to be done. But then the next question I would ask is, how do you guys document things?
Right.
Because I found that a lot of times in tech interviews, the interviewers are asking you these kind of like more fit questions, and they're telling you things about their organization, right? Like if they're asking you about documentation, either they're really into it and they want to make sure that you are also into it, or they have none
And they
and
might want
they
you to
would like
start it.
someone to make it. Yes. And
Right.
maybe that's not something that's super interesting to you to like
Right. Right.
document, be the person that makes all the documentation for a team.
And on the flip side of that, maybe not specifically about documentation, but if you're asked about a topic and you find that you do not have answers and you have trouble coming up with them, this is a really great point for you to note. This is a thing I should learn, right? This is a thing that I should learn something about. So if I'm asked about it again, or say you do get the job and this thing they asked you in the interview process, there's a good chance that whatever that technology was, they're using it, right? And if you learn something about it between the interview and when you start, it's only going to make you look better, and you're going to be more prepared. So
Yeah. And that brings up another great point of in your tech interview. Nate, have you ever asked somebody an interview question and they come up with some crazy off the wall, completely insane answer?
I haven't had that many of those, to be honest. I usually get if they don't have a good answer, I most people will just be honest and say they don't know, right? Which I think is probably the right way to go.
I agree. Um, if they ask you a question and you don't know the answer, you should
Just
tell them you
admit it.
don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You
Um,
you could maybe extrapolate on how you would get the answer, to go back to our
yep.
previous point, but yeah, there's nothing wrong with saying I'm not sure, but I'd be happy to learn.
Yeah. Or I've never had that experience. Right.
Yeah.
Um, great answers if you don't know the answer to the question. I have had people make up answers. And I think this is the other thing about tech interviews is I will never ask a question in a tech interview that I don't know the answer to. Because if I ask you a question I don't know the answer to, I can't judge whether you can answer that question or not because I don't know the answer. So if I'm asking you a question, it's because I already kind of know what I'm expecting to hear. So if you come back with something insane, that is also extremely telling. So like if we ask that network question, right? You're like, hey, user reports a network question. You're like, I will user add the user. Interesting. not at all networking.
Doesn't really help
Um,
the problem, right?
right. But like right there, you just like derailed your whole interview. And that's probably not something I'm interested in taking on as a teammate of someone who completely shoots out to a ridiculous answer. Um, I would much rather prefer a teammate that's like, I don't know, that's outside my wheelhouse. Um, but I would be interested in knowing, right? That's a teammate I want to work with. Um, rather than like, oh, I reformat the machine. What?
Right. Nobody wants to run
No,
that thing anyway.
that's right. Hey, you're having database problems. Reinstall the box. What?
Switch to
No.
Postgres.
Uh,
Yeah, that may be a little too opinionated, right? So, all right. So, did you want to touch any more of those, or should we move on?
I think we're good.
All right. So, I had thrown these in there. Maybe you didn't have a chance to read them, pre-read them before. So this may be catching you flat-footed, right? But how much weight would you say the technical interview carries as compared to like the more business related pieces of the interview, right? So we talked at the beginning about there's obviously like HRE stuff that has to happen, like certifications and schooling and whatever, right? Whatever would quote unquote qualify you on paper for a thing versus the actual tech interview where you're demonstrating those skills. What do you think it's like? Is there a ratio, a percentage, something that you could throw out there?
So I think they're all important, but you can not do well in your tech interview, and that will keep you from getting the job. Period. Right? Because
Right.
you're not able to demonstrate that you have the skills necessary to perform the job, you will not be hired for that job. So the tech interview is often a selection point where it's like if you can pass the tech interview, you'll go into more interviews and have other opportunities to talk with different people. So when we do interviews, I often schedule the tech interview as the first or second interview. And if they don't do well in the tech interview, then they don't get any interviews past that. So
Right.
oftentimes it's like a gatekeeping interview for the rest of the process.
Sorry, I was trying to parse through a question that came in chat here. Someone asked, "Doesn't that depend on the interviewer?" And I'm not sure what the context is. So feel free to throw in some more context, and maybe we'll get to that question later. I'm not sure if that's related to your previous chats or something I said. Because of the time delay, I'm forgetting.
Well, I think that
Okay.
there's, you know, just going to dive into that a little bit, right? When you do a hiring manager interview, and we'll talk about hiring manager interviews in another program in about a
Mm.
month. Hiring managers are not always technical,
Oh, okay. Right.
right? And so they're going to ask you a lot of like behavioral fit, team fit. Do I want to work with this person? Do I think they're a good match for my team? That's the type of interview questions they often ask. And then they leave the team members, the technical team members, to conduct the technical interview where they're gauging whether this person has the skills to perform the job. So both are very important, right? If you don't vibe with the hiring manager interview, then that's also going to be a challenge to land that job, right? Because that's the person who will decide to hire you or not. And if you're not vibing, they're probably going to choose not.
Right.
So I think between the two of them, I would say that they're both important. Um, I think that
Looks like
there
you got
is
the right thread here, by the way, because
okay,
they're in chat here saying that. Yep, that's it.
yeah. Um, so they're both very important. I think that there's leeway in like you don't have to nail all of it, right? Especially in tech interview. Again, for us, it's more about like how deep do they go? Do I think they can do the job that I'm hiring for?
Right.
And you might be super deep on a thing that I find interesting, but isn't really needed for the job.
Right.
Um, or you might not be deep on something that I find interesting, but isn't super really needed for the job. And that
But
might be okay to pass through.
in um in some cases, being super deep on one thing, even if it's not directly related, could at least show aptitude, right? Like, is that something that might be considered valid, like, oh yeah, we're going back to that mail thing, right? Like, oh man, I am like the best Exchange admin on the planet, but you guys run Postfix or something, right? Like, is that, I guess, is that enough? Is that enough to say, okay, well, you're going to have to learn the nuances of postfix, but at least you have the concepts from your Exchange experience, right?
So if it was that kind of situation, one, I think the HR screen and any pre-interviews before that tech interview didn't go right.
Maybe
Because
they failed.
if you're an Exchange administrator and my company uses nothing but Linux and postfix,
Right.
that's probably not a good fit, right?
Right.
Like, yes, email works the same on both. How the email is transited, what components of the email there are, routing, spam filtration, things like that. But the actual like service infrastructure that provides it is very different.
Very
And
different.
I don't expect someone who has awesome Exchange skills to then necessarily have awesome postfix skills and vice versa. I think if I
Right.
was a postfix admin and I was interviewing for Exchange administrative position, that's probably not a good fit unless I'm trying to get out of what I'm doing and get into something completely different,
If I
which
was an
sometimes
Exchange
happens.
admin, if I was an Exchange admin, I'd want a career change too.
Exchange is fine.
I've done it. I
Um,
don't like it. I do not like it. All right. So I have been asked, but I've never really tried to use these when I'm interviewing others. I've been asked questions like, what's your greatest technology accomplishment? And then the converse of that, what's your biggest failure that you can recall? I'm kind of curious your thoughts on those. Like, do those belong in a tech interview? If they're framed in a like, what's a cool project you've worked on that you're really proud of, or what's a project you worked on that just completely fell over, right?
so I think the first one, what's a project you've worked on that you thought was really awesome, is a
Yeah,
nice icebreaker because it allows the person to talk about something they're confident in. Um, and with that, you'll get into like some of the technology that they used for that project, which might lead you to some of these other questions, right? To dive deeper and to see what their what their familiarity is, or even finding out like reasoning, right? Like why did you choose this versus that? That just to get the conversation. Maybe you have opinions, or maybe it's just you'd like to know someone else's opinion on a thing.
right.
I think what's your biggest failure? Um,
It's a tough one.
That's a tough one. Yeah.
It
Um,
really leads into a possible like downer, right?
right. Now, in manager interviews, I almost always ask, "What's something that didn't turn out the way you planned, and what would you do differently to drive a different result?" Right. And I think that's probably a nicer way of wording the like, "What's your failure?" question.
Right.
And what I'm looking for there is one um, that a red flag. And I've had somebody do this in an interview once. I asked them that question, and they went, yeah, no, nothing. I've never had anything not work the way I planned.
I do everything right. Yeah.
Yeah. And I was like, really? Nothing. Not even in your personal life. Like nothing has ever not gone the way you expected. And they're like, nope, we did not hire that person. Um, because I think that's unusual. Either
Yeah,
they
right.
thought they had never
Everybody's
done
got
something
some
wrong,
failure in their life. Yeah.
or maybe to them they never thought anything had failed. But that's also like, did somebody else think it had failed, but you didn't think it failed? Anyway, that was weird. That was an outlier. I've only ever had one of those.
Yeah. Yeah.
The bigger thing that I'm looking for is not for someone to tell me about how they like train wrecked their last position, but instead is like, this thing didn't work out, and if they can answer the what would you do differently, that tells me they've already thought about it. That if they had to do it again, they would do this other thing. They learned from that experience
Right.
to formulate what they could have done to drive a different result. Because everyone makes mistakes, right? we are people and people make mistakes. The bigger thing is that we learn from those mistakes so we don't keep remaking the same mistake. So, uh,
Exactly. Right. And
right.
that's applicable to so many things, but especially when you're dealing with technology for possibly some very important infrastructure, right? Like, did you learn from the mistakes you made, or are you going to keep lighting things on fire accidentally throughout your entire
and,
career?
and claiming success.
Yeah. And I did great. Everything's on fire. I'm going to go get a job somewhere else now because I've done all I can here.
That's right. I've burned it to the ground all I can.
Yeah. So I've got
Um,
one, and I don't know what I imagine your answer is going to be here, but have you ever run into a question you've asked during an interview or a tech interview where you're like, "Wow, I'm never asking that one again."
hmm.
Like that, every time I've asked this, it's been a terrible result. I'm not doing this anymore.
No,
Or
I
do you
don't think
always
I've ever
put more
had.
thought into those before you get there?
Yeah, I don't think I've ever had that. There are a whole bunch of questions that, like, as an interviewer, you don't ask.
Right. There's
Um,
legal reasons, right? And things
right,
like that.
but also like just professionally, like I'm not going to ask about someone's personal life because it's their personal life, and that's not what they're here to do. They're here for their professional and work life.
Right.
And
Right.
so,
Sometimes you might want to ask that because sometimes personal life really does impact someone's professional life. But it is a very difficult thing to say like, "Hey, is your life a train wreck?" Because if it is, I'm
right,
not sure if I want to hire you.
right. But I mean, there's things that you can do to find out some of that information if you were really
Right.
interested, like finding them on social media and other stuff. If you want to know about that aspect of the candidate. Um, yeah. So I don't try to think. I think early on, I would ask questions that I was interested in knowing the answer to without necessarily knowing what to expect. And I think that was a mistake as a technical interviewer. I've been on the receiving end of a lot of those like deep dive questions where it's an excuse for the interviewer to tell me about their expertise, which is kind of the opposite of what you want in an interview.
Hmm.
Um, and again, this is part of the like you're interviewing them too. So when that happens, I ask myself, would I want to work with this person? If this if this is how they are on first meeting me, is this the person I would want to be a teammate to?
Right.
So yeah, I would say those things. Know the answer to the questions that you're asking, or a good idea of what you expect the answer to be, so that you're not
Right.
surprised.
Crazy
And you
open-ended questions can be crazy, right?
right, like Nate, what if you could be a color? What color would you be? Right, like
It's a
how's
tough one.
that telling me much about the person? So
There's been some interesting conversation, by the way. I wish YouTube showed me names like it used to. Now they're all handles, and I can't figure out how to switch it back. I feel like an old man complaining about technology changes. But anyway, there's some comments about agreeing with me about exchange. If you're an exchange admin, you'd be looking for a change in career. That's a good one.
uh
All right. So I think that runs us off the end of our planned show, and I don't see much else question wise in the chat. So yeah, I think we made it through. I hope folks have enjoyed our weird little tangent into hiring. Hopefully, it helps folks out, right?
well, especially today, people are out there looking for jobs.
Oh yeah, right. With the job market being, I thought you were going to lead it up with. By the way, Nate, we have some talking to do.
Well,
All right. So, yeah, I guess we want to thank everybody for showing up today. Thanks for checking out the show. Don't forget the like and subscribe buttons. They are very important to those of us that at least like to get views on the YouTubes and share our thoughts and whatnot. And yeah, I guess we don't really have a plan for the next show yet. Not next week, but the week after I'm out. So we'll have one more episode before the Thanksgiving. Well, we're both out for Thanksgiving, of course. So we'll have one more show before Thanksgiving. We're not sure what that's going to be just yet.
Yeah, but we'll figure it out. And then I think we had scheduled the like secondary kind of follow up to this on hiring for mid December when you're out, but
Right.
I'm in.
Right.
Um,
Right.
and there we'll talk more about like, you know, things that I'm always going to ask you in an interview, right? Which I think most people will probably ask you several common questions that you should think about before you show up to talk with them. Um, I saw one late breaking chat question. Um, Nate, what do you think about people having home lab projects on their resume?
Yeah, I see that. In fact, we probably should have included that. That's one of the things I like to ask people during a tech interview is do you have a home lab? Not as a qualifier for we're not going to hire you if you don't have a home lab, but that leads into questions around like, well, what do you do with your home lab? Do you run any cool projects in your home lab? Do you use it for learning? Do you use it to like better understand technologies or, like what's it for, right? And that kind of lets you glean a little bit about what motivates that person and kind of if they're passionate about technology or if they're just in technology because it pays the bills, right? And both of those people are valid to hire, but it's good to know that coming in sometimes.
Yeah, and I would say home lab is great, especially when you're like in a career change or you're early in your career where you don't have that like background of work history,
Yeah,
but you want to demonstrate that you have knowledge on a thing. So recently, I was interviewing an intern candidate for next summer, and on his resume, he had asked me about my home lab, and I thought that was cool. And I asked him about his home lab, and so we talked to him about like the machines he's using, what he uses it for, and um, he's still in college, so he doesn't have years or decades of work experience. But this
exactly.
gives us some foundation of like ways that we can assess one another, right? So if you're maybe coming from a non-tech background and you've been friend who's good with computers for a long time, and now you're trying to get into the a more established technical role, showcase the stuff that you've done in your personal life or your home lab or whatever
Right.
uh, on your resume so that the interviewer can have something to ask you about to gauge your expertise and fit.
My first admin position, I'm pretty sure the personal projects that I had were part of what got me the role because up until that I had mostly a career in support. I had done tech support, right, which of course is a technical skill. Then I moved into sort of a higher level of networking slash technical support, but I still wasn't really running anything. And the position I was applying to was basically the assistant admin for a two admin shop, right? So there was going to be a lot of responsibility on my shoulders. So, being able to show that I was doing DNS for my own because I wanted to run a website and running, building my own website out and running a web server and my own email, right? Like those were all things that were valid uh, experience, even though I didn't have the technically like directly related job experience.
That you weren't paid to do it, but you had learned how to
Exactly.
do it.
Right, right, exactly. I did it because I wanted to do it. I did it because I wanted to learn it, and that not only showed that I wanted to do it, but also that I was able to build up those skills without someone threatening me with a paycheck,
Or promising you a paycheck,
promising
keeping
me
the
a
glass
paycheck.
half
It's a
full.
better way to look at it.
uh, all right, everyone. Well, thank you for tuning in today. We'll do a more traditional Into the Terminal next week.
Yep,
Um, and
on
then,
something
man, we're getting close to the end of the year.
we
Um,
are. We'll have to think up a fun episode again. Maybe we'll do. We did our top 100 commands. Maybe we should do our top 200 commands. It'll take like 6 hours. We'll be here all afternoon.
yeah, let's not do that.
No, no,
Um,
not a good idea.
no, no. Uh, one of the things that we have done is like, did we like do an episode on breaking machines in unfixable ways?
I don't
That might
remember.
be fun.
We've done a lot of live troubleshooting where we break machines and try to fix them. In fact, it might have been
Yeah,
last year that that I like deleted boot and had to rebuild it, and we did that on the air.
Yeah. But like that's the thing is you actually have to put thought into breaking a machine in such a way that you can diagnose and repair it.
Yeah,
But maybe we should just like burn everything to the ground. Just keep
light
burning
it,
it.
light it on fire, see what happens.
Oh, actually, I think we did that last year. Like, never do this on a machine or something like that.
We might have.
Hmm.
So
Well, we'll come up with a good end. Well, our actual end of year episode is going to be that hiring manager interview one because that's
right.
Nate's out on end of year PTO, and I will be leaving after that show. Um, so maybe we'll have to do something before that one.
All right. Well, I hope everybody has a great weekend, and I guess we will catch you next week.
Next week. Thanks, everybody.
Have a great one.